When we go to the Tournament of Champions, go to the DK page. Actually, let's go to the bucket system. This is where really I want to focus in on. We had a total of 24 buckets. Remember, I have stat categories. We didn't have a last week bucket, and we didn't have a recent form bucket. So those stat categories go away, which leaves us with the 4 that are on the screen. Last year buckets, course history buckets, salary buckets, and strokes gained buckets. So technically, we only had 24 total buckets. Of those 24, you can see the success rate over here. We had 2 that failed. So we were successful in 22 of 24 buckets. That kind of goes hand in hand with the same percentages we see every single week. I've never seen anything worse than 31 out of 36 buckets, because we usually have 36 buckets every single week. This week, or last week, we only had 24. This week, we'll have 30, because we won't have recent form buckets, but we'll have a last week bucket since they did play last week. And basically what I do is I look at every golfer that's in the top 10, or which golfer fits in these buckets, how many of them fit inside the top 10. I look at that versus the projection. If it's lower or higher than that projection, I'll look to see what was in the optimal lineup. Usually if it's higher, I'll then see what's in the optimal lineup. And if that number still fits inside the projection, or if say the top 10 doesn't, but the optimal lineup does, that bucket would be a success. Because again, we are only searching for the optimal lineup. If we get lucky, don't hit the optimal, but still come across a GPP winning lineup, all the better. Remember, we're aiming small to miss small. So 2 buckets that failed, one of them being the course history 6 bucket, which are golfers who did not play, who have never played this event. That is what fits inside the course history 6. We had 4 total. I was only projecting somewhere between 1 to 2, but remember, the maximum doesn't go over 2, then we automatically drop the minimum down to a 0. So I was really only looking for 0 to 2 golfers from this course history 6 bucket. Could not even hit the optimal lineup with that, so we failed there. I have a feeling that this has more to do with how good the golfers were in that bucket. And if I really want to cheese my projections, my conservative projection, remember I go over this every single week. My conservative projection, which takes in my sweet spot score, had this actually over 2, which means this would have rounded up to 3, and this bucket would have been successful if we were to take the sweet spot score in. Why I don't do that currently is this is more of a trial run just to see how good this miscellaneous information is. I haven't had a full year to analyze it, so I don't quite want to use it as a part of the process. But yeah, we could have gotten 3 for sure, but we obviously didn't. The other bucket that failed were the strokes gained 2 buckets, and really there's no excuse here because my conservative max projection wasn't over 2, and neither was my original projection. 0 to 2 was my projection. Same thing with the course history 6s. We had 4 golfers in the top 10, 3 in the optimal lineup. So those 2 buckets failed. The rest of them were successful. And of course, we use this, and I'm gonna hurry up and pull up the SweetSpot DFS optimizer. We use this in the optimizer. So I like to add all of those rules right here, all the projections. Now I have this blanked out. I have all the minimums set to 0, all the maximums set to 6 to get to the optimal lineup. This is an easy way for me to figure out what the optimal lineup is. Put in their DK score, which is here in this metric, and it spits out the optimal lineup, which was 49,500. I'll get to that here shortly. Or why don't I just bring it up now? That's fine. So your optimal lineup, 49,500. It consisted of John Rahm, Colin Morikawa, Max Homa, Tom Hoagie, Tom Kim, and JJ Spawn. Crazy. 49.5. Now, if you're watching any of my videos or even on the Fantasy Golf Pod, we were talking about how to construct your lineups. I said you most likely wanted to start with a 10K. Like, there was a really good chance that there could be 2 10Ks inside the top 10. And what do you know? There were 2 10Ks in the top 10. Now, there's only 39 golfers in this field, so it's not like I'm really tooting my horn like, ooh, I figured out, you know, the answer to DFS golf. I'm not saying that, but how good these golfers were, the buckets that they were in, everything were pointing to 2 10K golfers being inside the top 10. Now, personally, I started all my lineups with Scotty Scheffler and Justin Thomas, which was the wrong route to go. perhaps I should have went with Scotty Scheffler and Jon Rahm. Or maybe a better one would have been Scotty Scheffler and Colin Morikawa. If I was going Scott, because obviously I was set on Scotty. I wasn't really set on John. But if I would have went with Jon Rahm and just did that 10-9-8 setup, I could have went Rahm, Morikawa, Tom Kim pretty darn easy. And then from there, I remember I told you, you make two substitutions from the 10-9-8 7-7-6 model. You go 10-9-8, trade up from a 7, so another 7 up to an 8, and you could also drop one of your other 7s down to a 6, which would look like a 10-9-8-8-6-6 model, which is exactly what you got with the optimal lineup. And it's pretty realistic to get there because it used $49,500 of the salary. You didn't have to leave a lot of money on the table to get there. I didn't go Jon Rahm, so I was never going to hit the optimal lineup. And somewhere down the road, I'll create a strategy video that talks about roster construction. And it is much easier to hit the optimal lineup if you anchor around 2, 3, or 4 golfers, because then it limits the amount of lineups you can absolutely make. So if you follow the bucket system to go with those anchor plays, if you hit with those 2, those 3, those 4 golfers, they are in the optimal lineup, then the chance of you actually hitting the optimal lineup is so much greater, so much higher, which is obvious. But let's just say I did go with Jon Rahm instead of Scotty Scheffler, and perhaps I just wasn't that sold on JT like I was, but I was. So I can't even say what if, but I think I could have got to Jon Rahm, Colin Morikawa. Actually, let me rewind that, because when we do put in all of the constraints that I had originally, which I have over here, I just paste these in here. That's how simple this is, this optimizer. And I hit run optimize. We're going to get to a lineup that uses all $50,000 of the salary. It does include 2 6K golfers, which one is Tom Hoge, the other one is Luke List. We have 2 9K golfers in Morikawa and Finau. We go Rahm and then Max Homa. I did paste that right here. So this Sweet Spot Optimal scored 794 points. Now, would that have beaten the GPP winning lineup? It would have by 1 point. So if we would have followed the bucket system, all of the rules, there was a good shot that we were actually going to take down a GPP lineup. But of course, again, didn't go with Jon Rahm. Well, I went Scotty and Scheffler, so that was already a no-go. It wasn't going to work out. Is there anything else that I need to talk about with the review? I don't think so. I mean, Morikawa choked it at the end. 3 really bad holes at the wrong time. Jon Rahm came through victorious. So it's something we need to remember for next year, just to not really get too excited about Colin for next week. But I mean, he was in a good spot. I don't think there's a thing to not get too excited about. But that was your review for the Tournament of Champions.